My name is David Carter. I am from Ohio, and if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that silence between family is never really silent at all. It's full of echoes, echoes of things said, things left unsaid, and wounds that never quite heal. For 20 years, my son refused to see me. For 20 years, I lived with nothing but those echoes. And then, one Christmas, everything exploded. But before I tell you about that, you need to know how it really began, because it didn't start quietly, it started with a fight. A fight that tore my family in two. You think you can just walk out on us and come back like nothing happened? My wife's voice sliced through the kitchen, sharp as broken glass. Plates clattered against the counter as she slammed them down. My son, barely 18 at the time, stood right beside her, his arms crossed, his eyes burning with the same fire she carried. And me? I was standing in the doorway, coat in hand, 1 foot outside the family I thought I could hold together. "Don't twist this on me, Laura." I shouted back, my chest tight, my face hot with the kind of anger that comes from years of feeling misunderstood. "I'm not walking out, I'm trying to survive. You don't know what it's like, carrying all this weight while you stand there blaming me for everything." My son, Ethan, stepped forward, his voice cracking but strong enough to cut through me like a knife. "You're a coward, Dad. You always were. You run when things get hard. That's all you ever do." His fists clenched at his side, and for the first time in his life, he stood against me, not as my little boy, but as a man ready to throw me out of his world. The room spun, the air heavy with betrayal. My own son, my blood, looked at me like I was nothing more than a stranger. And I lost it. "You don't know a damn thing about sacrifice, Ethan. You've been handed everything I worked myself into the ground to give you. Don't stand there judging me when you've never carried a single burden in your life." But the words didn't land the way I wanted. They didn't open his eyes, they closed his heart. He looked at me with disgust, with a finality I'll never forget. "Then go," he said, his voice low, steady, and deadly serious. "If all you know how to do is run, then run. But don't you dare come back. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my father anymore." The silence after that felt louder than any scream. My wife didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look on her face told me everything. Disappointment. Hatred. Resentment. In that one night, in that one argument, I lost not only my wife but my only son. I walked out that door, thinking maybe time would heal it. Thinking maybe one day he would understand. But days became months, months became years, and years became 20. And in all that time, I never once got a call, never once got an invitation, never once got forgiveness. Until last December. I was sitting alone in my small apartment, the same one I'd been renting since my divorce. The TV was playing some cheerful Christmas special, but it only made the emptiness louder. And then, for the first time in 2 decades, my phone lit up with a name I thought I'd never see again. Ethan. I stared at it, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I thought it was a mistake, a wrong number, maybe even a cruel joke. But when I answered, his voice was there. Older, deeper, but still his. "Dad," he said, the word sounding foreign, like it didn't belong on his tongue anymore. "I want you to come home for Christmas." Just like that. No apology, no explanation, just an invitation. After 20 years of silence, he wanted me back in the very house where he had cast me out. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or hang up. Because forgiveness doesn't usually come gift-wrapped. There's always a reason behind it. And trust me, his reason would shake me to my core. But before I tell you why my son suddenly invited me back, let me leave you with this: words spoken in anger can build walls higher than time itself. And sometimes, when those walls finally crack, what comes through isn't love, it's truth. And truth has a way of breaking everything wide open. So let me take you on this journey. A journey of betrayal, of silence, of a Christmas reunion that wasn't what it seemed. Because when my son opened that door after 20 years, he didn't just bring me back into his life, he brought me face to face with a secret that could destroy us both. And if you're listening to this right now, I want you to remember one thing: never wait until it's too late to speak the words your heart is holding. Because sometimes, silence isn't peace. It's poison. So stay with me. Because what happened that Christmas, it changed everything. Forever. When Ethan's call ended that night, I just sat there staring at my phone as if it had betrayed me. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater rattling against the cold winter outside, but my chest was roaring with questions. 20 years of silence, and then suddenly he says, "Come home for Christmas." It didn't make sense. My mind replayed his words again and again, but instead of comfort, they only made the old wounds bleed. I wanted to believe it was forgiveness. I wanted to believe that time had softened him, that maybe he had realized fathers are not perfect, that maybe he had finally understood the pain I carried. But deep down, something inside me whispered that it wasn't that simple. Because real forgiveness doesn't sound cold. His voice had been steady, distant, almost rehearsed. He didn't say, "I miss you." He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He just said, "Come." And when someone you love, someone who once hated you enough to cut you out for 2 decades, suddenly opens the door again, you learn not to walk through it without asking why. But despite every doubt, despite every scar, I knew I would go. You see, when you're a father, no matter how much anger your child throws at you, no matter how many years pass in silence, your heart still beats for them. My son could have spat on my grave and I would still have loved him. That's what being a parent does, it shackles your soul to someone else forever, whether they want you or not. I remember sitting on my old couch, my suitcase open on the floor. I hadn't packed in years. My hands trembled as I folded shirts and slid them inside. It wasn't just packing clothes, it was packing 2 decades of regret, stuffing it into a bag and dragging it back into a life I thought I had lost. Every crease of the fabric seemed to whisper, "What if he still hates you? What if this is just another chance to humiliate you?" But another voice, softer, stubborn, answered, "What if this is the last chance you'll ever get to see your son?" That night, I barely slept. Memories played behind my eyelids like a cruel film. Ethan as a boy, chasing fireflies in the backyard. Ethan holding up his first trophy, his grin wider than the horizon. Ethan slamming the door in my face, his words like a hammer, "You're not my father anymore." It was a reel that never ended, a loop of love and loss tangled so tightly it suffocated me. And by dawn, I knew there was no choice. I would go back, even if it broke me all over again. The drive to the old neighborhood felt like traveling through time. The snow fell heavy, blanketing the streets in silence, but inside me there was no peace. Every mile closer felt like stepping toward a firing squad, not a family reunion. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, every turn of the road pulling me deeper into a storm of dread. When I finally pulled into the street where I had once lived, the sight of that house nearly stole my breath. 2 decades had changed it, fresh paint on the shutters, new lights glowing warmly in the windows, but it was still the same place where I had lost everything. The same porch where Ethan once sat waiting for me to come home, the same doorway where he had pushed me out. My chest ached with the weight of ghosts. I sat there in my car for what felt like hours, staring, frozen, watching families through frosted windows laughing, children running with presents, neighbors carrying trays of food. Christmas joy everywhere. And me? I was just a man on the outside, a stranger about to knock on his own family's door. Finally, I forced myself out of the car. My boots crunched on the snow, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the porch, my hand hovered over the doorbell. I almost couldn't do it. My breath came out in shaky clouds, my pulse pounding in my ears. But before I could press it, the door opened. And there he was. Ethan. Older now, of course. 20 years had sculpted him into a man I barely recognized. His shoulders were broader, his jaw sharper, his eyes harder. But those eyes, those same eyes that once looked at me with love, then with hate, they were still his. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was louder than thunder. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said, flat, clipped. Not warm, not cold. Just, hollow. Inside, the house was filled with the glow of Christmas lights, the smell of pine and cinnamon, the sound of faint music in the background. But I didn't feel welcome. I felt like an intruder in a museum of memories I no longer belonged to. On the walls were pictures, Ethan's graduation, his wedding, his children. My grandchildren. Faces I had never met, milestones I had missed. And in none of those frames was I. Not once. As I stood there, my throat tightening, I realized the truth: this wasn't just a reunion. This was a reckoning. He hadn't called me back to forgive. He had called me back for something else. And though I didn't know it yet, that something else would shake me harder than the night he cast me out. Ethan led me into the living room, and I swear my feet felt heavier with every step. The house was alive with warmth, children's laughter spilling from the back hallway, the crackle of a fireplace dancing under the glow of stockings and garlands. But none of that warmth reached me. I stood there clutching my coat like a shield, as if I could hide behind it from the storm that was about to hit. Then I heard it. A little voice, light and curious. "Daddy, who's that?" I turned, and there she was, a little girl with chestnut hair and wide, innocent eyes. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. She stood in her pajamas, clutching a teddy bear, looking at me like I was some stranger who had wandered into her perfect world. Ethan bent down beside her, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. His voice softened in a way it never did for me. "That's your grandfather, sweetie." The word hit me harder than any insult ever had. Grandfather. For years, I had dreamt of hearing it. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like to see my grandchildren, to hold them, to know that even though I had lost my son, a piece of me still lived in the next generation. But in that moment, it didn't feel like a gift, it felt like a knife. Because the way Ethan said it wasn't warm, wasn't proud. It was clinical. Detached. Like he was introducing a stranger at a business meeting. The girl looked up at me, her little brows furrowed. "I have a grandpa." Her words nearly broke me. Because behind that innocent question was the truth, that for 7 years of her life, my son had erased me so completely that his own child didn't even know I existed. "Yes," Ethan said quickly, almost dismissing it. "You do. Why don't you go play with your brother now?" She nodded, still staring at me curiously, before running down the hall. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me standing there with my heart in pieces. I finally spoke, my voice hoarse. She didn't even know I was alive, did she?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He just stared at the fire, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, "There was no reason for her to." The words landed like a slap. "No reason?" I whispered. "I'm her grandfather, Ethan. Your father. How could you erase me from her life like that?" His eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time, I saw the anger simmering beneath his calm mask. "How?" "The same way you erased yourself from mine. You think you get to choose when to be a father, when to show up and when to vanish? No. You left, remember? You left me to pick up the pieces. Don't stand there acting like you've been wronged." I wanted to shout back, to tell him he didn't understand, that it hadn't been as simple as leaving. That life, money, struggles, the crushing weight of trying to provide had pushed me away. But I saw in his eyes it didn't matter. To him, there was no excuse. I had failed. Before I could speak again, another voice came from the kitchen. A woman's voice, firm but cautious. Ethan, is everything okay? She stepped into the room, a tall woman with kind features, her dark hair pulled back, her hands still dusted with flour. She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and calculation, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted the answer to. "This is, my dad," Ethan said flatly. Her brows lifted slightly, but she didn't look surprised. More like she had been expecting this moment. She stepped forward, extending a hand. "I'm Rachel. Ethan's wife." I shook her hand, my throat tight. "It's nice to meet you." She smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've heard a lot about you." I didn't have the courage to ask what kind of things they'd heard. Dinner that night was a battlefield disguised as a feast. The table was beautiful: roast turkey, mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, every dish shining under the glow of candles. But beneath the surface, tension sat heavier than the food itself. Every clink of silverware felt like a gun cocking, every silence like a countdown. Rachel tried to keep the air light, asking me polite questions about where I lived, what I did now. The children giggled, blissfully unaware of the history simmering around them. But Ethan barely looked at me. And when he did, it was with eyes that had 20 years of judgment stored inside them. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I set down my fork and looked him straight in the eye. "Why now, Ethan? After all these years, why invite me back? Why tonight?" The table went silent. Even the children seemed to sense the weight of the moment, their laughter dying down into whispers. Rachel glanced nervously at Ethan, but he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. And then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, his voice low, steady, but colder than I had ever heard it. "Because I need something from you." Those 6 words sucked the air out of the room. My heart dropped into my stomach. He hadn't called me back out of forgiveness, out of love, out of a desire to heal. No. He had called me back because he wanted something. I opened my mouth to ask what, but before I could, Rachel quickly stood, forcing a smile. "Why don't we save this for later? Tonight's Christmas Eve. Let's just enjoy dinner." But I knew this wasn't just a dinner. This was the opening move of a game I didn't even know I was playing. As the night dragged on, the tension only grew. I watched Ethan laugh with his kids, kiss his wife's cheek, carry plates to the sink like the man I had always hoped he'd become. But no matter how much he smiled, his eyes kept flicking back to me, sharp, calculating, like he was measuring me, waiting for the right moment. And as I sat there, surrounded by the family I had missed, by the life I had lost, one truth hit me harder than all the rest. This wasn't a reunion. It was a test. And before the night was over, I would find out exactly what my son wanted from me. That night, after dinner, the house grew quieter. The children were tucked into bed, their laughter fading into dreams, their innocence untainted by the storm brewing just one floor below. Rachel busied herself in the kitchen, her soft voice humming along with a Christmas carol on the radio, while Ethan sat across from me in the living room. The fire flickered between us, shadows painting our faces, but no warmth passed across that space. We weren't father and son, we were 2 soldiers, staring each other down across a battlefield of 20 lost years. I tried to speak first. "Ethan. I don't know what you've heard, what your mother told you, but you need to understand." He cut me off instantly, his voice sharp. "Stop. I don't want excuses. I don't want stories. You left. That's the truth. And I don't care how you justify it." The word stung, but I stayed calm. "I didn't leave you. I left a broken marriage. I left because I thought it was the only way to keep us from destroying each other. But I never stopped being your father. Not for a single day." He leaned forward, his eyes burning. "Then where were you when I graduated high school? Where were you when I got married? Where were you when my children were born? Don't stand there telling me you never stopped being my father when you weren't there for the moments that mattered most. I opened my mouth, but the truth caught in my throat. He was right. I hadn't been there. Not because I didn't want to, but because pride, shame, and fear had chained me to the silence. I had waited for him to come back, waited for him to forgive me, waited for him to call. But I never once had the courage to knock on his door. I was wrong, I finally whispered, my voice trembling. I should have fought harder. I should have come back, no matter how many times you pushed me away. For that, I am sorry. For a flicker of a second, I saw something soften in his eyes. But just as quickly, it hardened again. He leaned back, his tone colder. Apologies don't change the past. And I didn't invite you here for an apology. There it was again, that phrase, sharp as a blade, I need something from you. I swallowed hard. Then why? Why now? He hesitated. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked toward the stairs, where his children slept. Finally, he said, because family isn't just about the past. It's about the future. And whether I like it or not, you're part of that future. I frowned, confusion gnawing at me. What do you mean? Before he could answer, Rachel returned, drying her hands on a towel. She looked between us, sensing the tension. It's late, she said gently. Maybe we should all get some rest. Ethan gave a short nod, but his eyes never left mine. Tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow. And with that, he stood, turned, and disappeared upstairs. I was left alone by the fire, my heart racing, my mind spinning. Tomorrow. The word hung heavy in the air, filled with dread. Because whatever he had to tell me, I could feel it, it wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be about forgiveness or healing. It was going to be something far darker. That night, I couldn't sleep. They had given me the guest room, a small space tucked away at the end of the hall. The bed was soft, the blankets warm, but my soul felt restless. I stared at the ceiling, haunted by memories. I remembered Ethan's first Christmas, when he was barely a year old, toddling around the tree in his little red pajamas, giggling as he pulled ornaments off the branches. I remembered teaching him how to ride a bike, his little hands gripping the handlebars so tight, his face lit with determination. I remembered holding him the night he had a fever, whispering prayers into the darkness. And then I remembered the fight. The shouting. The look in his eyes when he told me I wasn't his father anymore. I turned on my side, my chest tight, whispering into the empty room. God, please, don't let me lose him again. Morning came with the sound of children running through the halls, their laughter a melody I hadn't heard in decades. I sat up, groggy, my body heavy with exhaustion. When I walked into the kitchen, Rachel was there, pouring coffee, her smile polite but guarded. Good morning, she said softly. Good morning, I replied, my voice rough. She hesitated, then set a mug in front of me. Ethan, he's not easy. He carries a lot. But under all that anger, he's a good man. He's a good father. Don't forget that. I nodded, grateful for her kindness. I can see that. You've built a beautiful family together. Her smile flickered, fading into something more serious. She lowered her voice. Just, whatever happens today, try to listen. Even if it's hard. Please. Before I could ask what she meant, Ethan walked in, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. He didn't sit. He just stood there, arms crossed, staring at me. It's time we talked, he said. Rachel placed a gentle hand on his arm, but he shook her off. His eyes locked on me, unblinking. We moved into the living room again, the children's voices echoing faintly from upstairs, the fire crackling low. He sat across from me, his posture stiff, his face unreadable. You want to know why I invited you here, he said finally. Yes, I answered, my voice steady, though my heart raced. He took a deep breath, his jaw clenched. Because my son, your grandson, is sick. And the doctors say the only chance he has, is if we find a match in the family. The world stopped. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. His words echoed like thunder in my skull. Sick. Only chance. Family match. I stared at him, unable to process it. What are you saying? He leaned forward, his eyes sharp, his voice like ice. I'm saying that after 20 years of silence, the only reason you're sitting in this house right now is because you might be the one thing that can save my son's life. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that refused to die. My son is sick. You might be the only one who can save him. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. For 20 years, I had dreamt of a reunion, of forgiveness, of being a father again. But now, I wasn't here because of love. I was here because of necessity. I was here because my blood was worth more than my presence. My voice shook when I finally spoke. What's wrong with him? Ethan's eyes hardened. Leukemia. He's only 10. They've tried everything. The doctor said the next step is a bone marrow transplant. The problem is, Rachel and I aren't a match. Neither is his sister. That leaves you. I sat back, my chest heavy, my mind reeling. My grandson. A boy I had never known, never held, never even heard of until the night before. And now his life might depend on me. Rachel's voice broke the silence, softer, gentler. The doctors said immediate family is the best chance. If you're a match, it could save him. We didn't know what else to do but call you. I looked at her, at the quiet desperation in her eyes, and I realized, this wasn't just Ethan's choice. It was hers too. She had put aside 20 years of anger, pride, and distance because her son's life mattered more than old wounds. I'll do it, I said immediately, without hesitation. Whatever it takes. If I can help, if I can give him a chance, I'll do it. But Ethan didn't look relieved. He didn't even soften. Instead, he narrowed his eyes, his voice sharp. Don't make promises you can't keep. You've done that before. The word stung, cutting deeper than he knew. I wanted to lash out, to remind him that I was here now, that I had said yes without question, that I was willing to risk my life for his son. But instead, I swallowed the anger and nodded. I mean it, Ethan. Test me. Do whatever you have to. I'm not going anywhere this time. The room fell into silence again. Rachel reached for Ethan's hand, squeezing it, but he pulled away, his gaze never leaving mine. Finally, he stood, his voice flat. We'll call the hospital tomorrow. They'll do the tests. And without another word, he walked out. I sat there, staring at the fire, my heart aching. Even now, even when his son's life hung in the balance, Ethan couldn't let go of his bitterness. I wasn't just a father trying to come back into his son's life, I was a tool. A resource. A last resort. And though I would do anything to save my grandson, part of me wondered if Ethan would ever see me as anything more. That night, I lay awake in the guest room again, staring into the darkness. Memories came back in waves, the night I left, the words that shattered us, the years of silence. And now, here we were, thrown back together by something bigger than both of us. I whispered into the shadows, maybe this is my chance. Maybe this is how I make it right. But even as I said it, I knew. Saving his son's life might not be enough to save my place in his heart. The next morning, we drove to the hospital. The air between us was thick, heavy, unspoken words pressing against the windows of the car. Rachel sat in the back with their daughter, her hand resting protectively on the boy's shoulder. I looked at him through the rearview mirror, pale, thin, his small frame weighed down by something no child should carry. He didn't look at me. He didn't even know me. And yet, here I was, his only chance. At the hospital, the nurses took blood samples. They spoke in soft voices, their movements careful, precise. I sat in a chair, watching the red stream flow from my arm into the vial, and I couldn't help but think of it as more than blood. It was time. Time I had lost with Ethan. Time I could give back through his son. Time that maybe, just maybe, could heal what years had broken. When it was over, we sat in the waiting room. The air smelled like antiseptic, cold and sterile, but my chest burned with anxiety. Ethan sat across from me, arms crossed, his face hard as stone. Rachel sat beside him, her eyes downcast, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. The boy lay curled in her lap, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. Finally, I broke the silence. Ethan. I know you hate me. And I know I deserve it. But I need you to understand, I'm not here out of guilt. I'm here because I'm your father. Because I love you. Because I love him, even if I'm only just meeting him now. I'll do this not because I owe you, but because it's who I am. For the first time, Ethan's face cracked. Not much. Just a flicker. His jaw trembled slightly, his eyes shifting. But just as quickly, the wall went back up. He shook his head. Words are easy. Blood is proof. We'll see. Hours later, the doctor returned. She held a clipboard, her expression serious but calm. We've run the initial tests. We should have results in the next 24 hours. If you're a match, we'll move forward immediately. I nodded, relief washing over me just to know the process was moving. But Ethan said nothing. He just stood, turned, and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there with Rachel. She sighed, rubbing her temples. He's harder on you than he needs to be. But you know why. I know, I said quietly. And I don't blame him. But it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. She looked at me then, her eyes kind, almost motherly. For what it's worth. I believe people can change. And I believe children deserve to know the truth about their family. Whatever happens with the test, don't give up on him. Don't give up on them. Her words struck deep. Because for 20 years, I had given up. I had let silence win. But now, faced with the fragile life of my grandson, I knew, I couldn't run anymore. I wouldn't. That night, back at the house, the tension grew thicker. Ethan avoided me, retreating to his study, leaving me with Rachel and the children. The little girl approached me cautiously, her teddy bear in hand. Are you really my grandpa? She asked, her eyes wide, searching. I knelt down, my heart trembling. Yes, sweetheart. I am. Why didn't I know about you? She asked innocently. I hesitated, my throat tightening. Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes. But I'm here now. And I promise, if you'll let me, I'll never disappear again. She smiled softly, then hugged me. The warmth of that little embrace nearly broke me. Because in that moment, I realized forgiveness doesn't always start with the person you hurt. Sometimes, it starts with the innocent heart of a child. Later, as I lay in bed waiting for the results of the test, one thought kept echoing in my mind: if I'm a match, I can save his life. But if I'm not, will I lose them all over again? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. My hands shook as I held it, not from the caffeine but from the weight of waiting. Rachel moved quietly around the kitchen, the soft clink of dishes filling the silence. Ethan hadn't come down. Every creak of the floorboards made my chest tighten. Every second dragged like an eternity. Finally, the phone rang. Rachel answered, her voice low. A pause. A gasp. Then she covered the receiver with her hand and looked at me. They want us at the hospital. Now. My pulse quickened. I stood, my chair scraping against the wooden floor. For the first time in 20 years, my legs felt weak, as though I carried more than just my own weight. When we arrived, the doctor met us in her office. She was calm, professional, but her words made Rachel collapse into tears. "You're a match," she said, looking at me. "A strong match. This gives your grandson the best chance." The room spun for a moment. Relief, joy, fear, they all collided at once. I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. I was the match. I could save him. Rachel covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God. Thank God." She turned to me, her eyes full of gratitude. Her voice cracked, "You've given him a chance." But Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his fists clenched at his sides. When we stepped out of the office, he turned on me like a storm breaking. "Don't think this makes you some kind of hero." His voice was sharp, slicing through the hallway. "Don't think saving him erases 20 years of nothing." "Ethan," Rachel began, but he raised his hand to silence her. His fury was aimed squarely at me. "You left me," he shouted, his voice echoing against the sterile hospital walls. "You left Mom. You left everything. And now you walk back in, like some savior, like we're supposed to thank you because your blood happens to match. You think this makes us even?" My throat tightened. The nurses looked over, whispers starting. But I didn't care about the stares. Only about him. "No," I said softly. "It doesn't make us even. Nothing could. But it makes me useful now. It makes me able to do something right for once." His eyes blazed. "Do something right? You don't get to say that. You don't get to claim redemption on the back of my son's illness." His words were knives, but I didn't flinch. "Not this time. I'm not here for redemption. I'm here for him. Your son. My grandson. I'll give whatever I can, not for me, not for you, but for him." Ethan's chest heaved, his fists trembling. Rachel reached for him, whispering his name, but he pulled away, his voice breaking. "You don't know what it was like, waiting for you. Watching Mom cry herself to sleep. Promising myself I'd never need you again." And there it was, the raw wound beneath the anger. Not just hate. Not just bitterness. But pain. A child's pain, carried into a man's body. My voice cracked. "Ethan, if I could go back, if I could change it, I would. Every day, I regret that night. Every day, I see your face, hear your voice. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But please, let me do this. Let me give him what I couldn't give you." For a moment, the hallway was silent, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Ethan's jaw trembled, but his eyes stayed cold. Finally, he turned and walked away, leaving Rachel and me standing there. She sighed, pressing a hand to her forehead. "He's not angry because you're here. He's angry because you weren't before." Her words cut deeper than Ethan's shouting. Because they were true. That evening, back at the house, preparations began. The doctors explained the process, the collection, the transplant, the risks. I signed papers with a hand that shook, but not from fear of the procedure. No, I feared something worse, that even if I saved his son, Ethan would never let me back into his life. Rachel tried to bridge the silence at dinner. The children ate quietly, sensing the storm. The little girl looked at me shyly. "Does this mean my brother will get better?" I smiled faintly, my chest tight. "It means he has a chance, sweetheart." She nodded, satisfied with that simple truth. But Ethan didn't look up from his plate. He didn't say a word. Later, I stood outside on the porch, the night air cold against my skin. I looked at the stars, whispering into the darkness, "If you give me this chance, if you let me save him, let it be enough. Please, let it be enough. Behind me, the door opened. Rachel stepped out, her sweater wrapped tight around her. You know, she said softly, he used to sit on this porch and stare at the road. For years, he believed one day you'd come back down it. My chest ached. And when I didn't? Her eyes glistened. That's when the anger started. When he stopped hoping. Anger was easier than heartbreak. I nodded, swallowing hard. I don't expect him to forgive me. Not now. Maybe not ever. But if my blood keeps his son alive, maybe that's enough. Rachel studied me for a long moment, then said quietly, maybe. Or maybe it's just the beginning. The next morning, we returned to the hospital for the first stage. As they prepared me, attaching lines, explaining procedures, I looked through the glass at Ethan. His arms were crossed, his face unreadable. But his eyes, they weren't just angry. They were afraid. Afraid to hope. Afraid to trust me. And as the machine began its slow, steady work of taking from me what his son needed, I realized, saving a life was one thing. Healing a heart, that would take far more than blood. The hospital room was too bright, too white, too still. Machines hummed softly, monitors blinked in steady rhythms. I lay on the bed with tubes snaking from my arm, my body tethered to a machine that would carry part of me into my grandson. I had faced battles before, illness, loss, loneliness, but none felt as heavy as this. Because this time, what flowed from me wasn't just blood. It was a lifetime of regret, a lifetime of absence, a lifetime of wanting to make things right. The nurses moved with practiced calm. Rachel hovered at the bedside, her hands clasped tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. And Ethan stood in the corner, arms folded, expression stone cold. But I noticed his eyes, they never left me. The machine beeped. The nurse explained the process again, though I barely heard. All I could focus on was the weight in my chest. The truth that this was the first thing I had ever truly given my son's family. Hours passed in a blur. The steady draining left me weak, my head heavy, but I didn't let it show. Not once. Because if Ethan looked at me and saw weakness, he'd see a man still unworthy. I wanted him to see a father who would bleed himself dry if it meant saving the boy. When it was over, they wheeled me into recovery. My body trembled, but my heart felt strangely lighter. I had given what I could. Now all that remained was hope. Rachel pressed my hand. You did it, she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. You gave him a chance. I nodded faintly, my throat too dry to speak. But Ethan didn't move closer. Not yet. He lingered by the door, his face unreadable. He stayed until the nurses asked him to step out. The next hours stretched endlessly. I wasn't allowed near the surgical suite where my grandson lay. All I could do was wait, tethered to the ache in my chest and the silence of the sterile room. Rachel came in and out, updating me in fragments. They're prepping him now. The transplant is beginning. They say it looks stable. But it wasn't her words that undid me. It was the moment when Ethan finally entered. Alone. He closed the door behind him, leaned against it for a moment, and then walked to the bed. For the first time in 20 years, he looked at me not with fire, but with something heavier. Something closer to pain. I watched you in there, he said quietly. His voice cracked. You didn't flinch. Not once. I met his eyes, my own blurry with exhaustion. He deserves everything I can give. His jaw trembled. He sat down in the chair by my bed, staring at the floor. Silence stretched between us, thick and unspoken. Finally, he whispered, why now? After all these years. Why come back now? The question I had dreaded. The truth I owed him. I swallowed hard. Because I couldn't carry it anymore. The night I left, it destroyed me too. I told myself I was doing you a favor, that you'd be better off without me. But every birthday I missed, every moment I wasn't there, it was like a stone in my chest. I kept hoping for courage to come back. And when I heard about your son, my voice cracked. I couldn't stay away any longer. Not if I could help him. Ethan's hand clenched into a fist. His breath shook. Do you know how many nights I hated you? How many times I swore I'd never speak your name? Yes, I whispered. I know. And I don't blame you. You had every right. He finally looked up at me. His eyes, red-rimmed, were no longer hard. But then I saw you today. Hooked up to that machine. Giving everything. And for the first time, I didn't feel hate. His voice broke. I just felt tired. Tears burned my eyes. Ethan. He shook his head, his voice trembling. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But, he hesitated, as though the words were too heavy. But maybe I don't want my son to grow up hating you the way I did. Maybe he deserves better than that. The weight in my chest loosened, just a fraction. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. A door, cracked open. I reached for his hand. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, slowly, he let me take it. It was the first time I had touched my son's hand in 20 years. The surgery stretched through the night. When Rachel finally burst into the room at dawn, her face glowing with tears, my heart nearly stopped. It worked, she whispered. The transplant, it worked. He's stable. Relief hit me so hard, I nearly wept. My grandson, alive. His chance restored. Ethan pressed his hands to his face, shoulders shaking. Rachel hugged him, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. I watched them, my family, fractured but breathing, alive. And for the first time in decades, I let myself hope. Weeks passed. Recovery was slow, for my grandson, for me, for all of us. The boy grew stronger day by day, his color returning, his laughter echoing faintly in the hospital room. And Ethan, though still guarded, began to soften. He sat with me sometimes, speaking little, but no longer with anger etched into every line of his face. He even let me hold his son's hand as the boy drifted to sleep. One evening, as I prepared to leave the hospital, Ethan walked me to the door. He didn't say much. Just a quiet, almost awkward. "Dad, thank you." 2 words. That was all. But they were more precious to me than any forgiveness. I nodded, my throat too tight to reply. As I stepped out into the evening air, the sky painted in shades of gold, I realized something: saving a life had been my gift. But the real miracle was the chance, not at redemption, not at erasing the past, but at beginning again. And sometimes, a beginning is enough.